Hi, everyone. My name is Paige Beaver, and I'm managing editor, soon to be senior editor for Cornerstone Press. And tonight we are celebrating the release of 5 new books: Dining on Salt by Wayne Lee, Torrential by Jane Merrick, Flu Season by Katie Kalish, Users with Access by Brandon Krieg, and No Trouble Staying Awake by Teresa Scullin. Before we get to the poets and their work, we would like to thank some people for their support to the press in various ways. So director and publisher, Dr. Ross Tangadel, executive editors, Jeff Snowbarger and Freesia McKee, and editorial director, Brett Hill, senior editor, Ellie Atkinson, Ingram Lighting Source, our distributor, Chancellor Thomas Gibson, Provost Levon Cornell Swanson, Vice Chancellor Pratima Gandhi of UWSP Financial Operations, Dean Joshua Hagan, Carrie Hudden, and Carrie Zawalski of the College of Letters and Sciences, as well as Assistant Dean Tobias Barsky of the School of Humanities and Global Studies, Chair Rebecca Stevens of the Department of English, as well as the entire faculty and staff of the department, Lindsay Cheever and Samantha Petch of the School of Humanities and Global Studies, Ihor Bartoshevsky of the University IT's department, Carrie Hebler, Brittany Kaminsky, and Maze Vang of University Communications and Marketing, Robin Spindler, Kathy Steedle, and their staff at the Point Print and Design Studio, Sue Fisher and Ava Hathaway of UWSP Facility Services and Central Stores, Katie Horn of UWSP Store and Text Rental, the Bookshop Co-op of Stevens Point, Bound to Happen Bookstore of Stevens Point, and our press would not be possible without the energetic participation from our diverse student staff, comprised mostly of English majors and minors at UWSP. Thank you to all our students for doing the hard work of publishing with professionalism and excitement. I would especially like to thank our current executive staff, which would include Senior Managing Editor Ava Nielsen, Managing Editors Paige Beaver and Carly Harpold, Production Director Allison Lang, Production Editor Samantha Bjork and Abby Paulson, Media Director Ava Willett, Sales Director Sophie Fearson, and Sales Managers Madison Schultz and Autumn Vine. Finally, I wish to thank Wayne, the late Jane Merrick, Katie, Brandon, and Teresa for entrusting us with their excellent work. Tonight is a celebration of their writing. Congratulations on the publication of your books and your entrance into the Cornerstone Press family. Finally, we're gonna start into the reading, and this first one will be Wayne Lee, who is a writer, editor, and teacher. His poems have appeared in Tupelo Press, Slipstream, The New Guard, The Lostroff Chronicle, Writer's Digest, and other journals. His collection, The Underside of Light, was a finalist for the 2014 New Mexico/Arizona Book Award. He lives in Santa Fe, New Mexico. So from there, Wayne, I'll let you read.
Thank you, Paige, and thank you, Ihor, and thank you to Cornerstone. This is my first book with Cornerstone, and it's been an absolute joy working with everyone from Cornerstone. So thank you for your professionalism and your attentiveness. It's been great. So my book, Dining on Salt, 4 Seasons of Septets, is actually a memoir in verse comprised of 80 7-line poems. When I turned 70 in June of 2018, I got the idea that I would write nothing but 7-line poems for the entire year. So I started that practice, not knowing that a few months later, my late wife, Alice, would take her life. My situation was that I had been her caregiver for 20 years. She had a genetic neuromuscular condition, and of course, I didn't know she was going to take her life. So at that point, the narrative of the book and of my life changed radically. So I'm going to share poems in chronological order, going through the book. And Let's see. I'll just start with this one. A word from grandmother. Each day on my forest walk, I pause to press my palms against her skin. The wrinkles on the backs of my hands, miniatures of her great ridges and ravines. Each day I wait like that until she speaks, blesses me with a single word benediction. Yesterday it was peace. Today it is patience. 20 of the 80 poems are written in traditional forms. The book also contains two appendices at the back, one on the history of septets. I did a lot of research and it's fascinating. And in fact, the rhyme royale was created by Chaucer. So that was the oldest form. And so I have examples of 20 different traditional forms here. So this is a Spanish septet. It's called What Lies Within. Before I open my eyes, I peer into hers to see if I can share her dream. Deep inside the earth, a gemstone glistens on a moonlit night. Beneath the waves, a blind fish finds its way. In the darkness, we merge, and what we cannot see disappears. Flying. Just as I'm missing the birds that have flown from the cold and the yellow leaves twisting in the wind, I meet a girl of 5 or 6 skipping down the street, arms outstretched, hair blown wild, flying in her heart. This next poem, at this point, Alice had already taken her life. So this poem was written a few days after that. It's called Friend. My Downs friend John asks, "How's your friend Alice doing?" "She died," I say. "That's nice," says John. "Alice is my wife," I say louder. John pauses. "How's your friend Alice?" "She's fine," I say. "Just fine." Root soup. I have this hunger for rootstocks, for rutabagas and Yukon gold potatoes, for unpeeled carrots, turnips, parsnips, for the fruits of the earth that ripen slowly in the autumn sun, for sweet onion, plump garlic, skin-on delicata squash, and for the kiss of seasoning, for sea salt, rosemary, peppercorns, lemon thyme. I have this need for what lies beneath. Navigator. That rattle in the armrest, my wife's red lipstick, those one-armed glasses in the glove box, hers. That torn map, that stale donut under the seat, that tin angel hanging from the rearview mirror, hers, all hers. That driver, red-eyed, road-weary, lost, hers, until she tells me where to turn. I'll just read a couple more. Things with feathers. Once again, the redtails revisit the nest they built 3 years ago in the cedar tree. 2 Junes in a row, they've flown away with no fledglings to show for their devotion. But now again, they fetch new sticks and twigs to weave among the old. Hope is indeed the thing with feathers, the spring that holds no memory of snow. Oh, I actually have 2 more. Wild goose. The Canada geese flap north in formation. Then one peels off and veers south. I worry about that goose, how it will fend, where it might end up. We're all flock animals. We need one another. We're all made of air. There is a land where nests are woven from flesh, where eggshells crack and life pecks its way blindly out of the darkness. If you get lost, I'll find you. If we get lost, it will be for love. And the last poem I'll read is the last poem in the book. The form is a cameo. It's called Seeds. We merge as a prayer within each other, ask for what we need. We are seeds, becoming trees, becoming seeds. Sing to me while you still have the words. Thank you very much. It's an honor to be here, and it's an honor to read with these other poets. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Wayne. That was a great reading. Then next up, I'm going to introduce Torrential, which is going to be read by Kate Dempling, because Jane Merrick, our author, passed away suddenly in January 2024, prior to the release of the book. So Jane Merrick was a respected poet, photographer, and literary scholar, having published poetry collections and critical studies, provided cover photos for numerous books throughout her varied career, and received 2 fellowships from the National Endowment for the Humanities for Literary Scholarships. She made her home in the Pacific Northwest near the wild and beautiful coast prior to passing away in January 2015 or 2025. So with that, Kate, I'll let you read from her collection.
Thanks, Paige. So I got to know Jane Merrick because both of us were on the staff of Bracken magazine. And last fall, we learned that she was having health problems. And in January, she let us know that these problems were serious enough that she would have to step away from the magazine. We were all hopeful that she would get better and be able to rejoin us. But sadly, this was not to be. And as Paige mentioned, she passed away that same month, January 2025. So all of us at Bracken were devastated, just like everyone who knew Jane and loved her. And in our June issue, we'll feature some tributes to Jane Merrick. And I'll put a link in the chat later after I read, if anyone would like to read those tributes in our next issue. So Jane's book Torrential came out in April, and I have a book coming out with Cornerstone Press next January. And I was really looking forward to celebrating our new releases together and maybe even reading together. Now Jane's book is here, but she is not, and this is very sad. At the same time, I feel grateful that I got to know Jane and that she's left us this wonderful book of poems, and then I have a chance to share a few of them with you today. So I'm going to start with Mud Puppy. This is the first poem in the collection, and I had to look up this word. So for those of you who may not know what it is either, a mud puppy is a kind of salamander. Mud Puppy. In my 20s, before I knew who I was, I climbed riverine wilderness, following the trail across a stream whose shadowed trace hid a sudden pulpy movement that halted me in mid-step. It took a moment to discern the speckled brown of a mud puppy's body. red gills like flowers wavering as it breathed the air in the water in air. Its ancient face, that of a space creature, fallen to earth to bring a message. Grip the rocks and let the current bring whatever feeds or harms you, however temporary, this water, this chance encounter, this shade-lapped, early, humble reckoning. This next poem is Last Crocus, and what is very cool about this poem, I think, is that it's from the point of view of the flower. Last Crocus. From the earth, I looked up into grasses, narrow and more beautiful than clouds. They lifted with me, parted for me. Their green brushed over and past, and I began to forget their touch when cold wind stretched my sleeves. Nevertheless, the air too was lovely, as autumn spun its orange blades. I learned to desire more color as colors faded, yellow mud clods, the black bruise of a late beetle, angular, stumbling toward lurid purple, a skin of ice, a kind of drink. I had waited so long to be, offered my thin golden word, opened my mauve gloves. The next poem is Ritual for Beasts. In spring, skunk cabbages unfold in ravines, spread yellow leaves and redolence distilled from salmon who died here last autumn. Rain pressed their bodies deep. Salmon return to open themselves completely. Home, where one must eat, where creatures would choose to die, and where I too want to vanish into 10,000 welcoming touches of soil, not afraid to be consumed in my turn. When I think of Jane's poetry, I think of nature, of the Pacific Northwest, of salmon, orcas, streams, and ravines. But she also wrote very movingly about human connections and encounters, about friends, and about family, as in this poem, Blue Jacket. After the memorial, it waited in the closet, hung slump-shouldered while we disagreed. Like my father, it seemed patient as we debated who might use the caps rimmed with sweat and brill cream, who'd take the worn walking stick. The whole closet was destined for plastic bags and the resale shop. Someone will want these, was our refrain. Someone who would understand that saving clothing and shoes and tools and money was the strongest lesson of life. I lifted the blue jacket from its hook, caught a whiff of desert dust, a reminiscence of Palo Verde, always sweet after rain. No, it did not fit me. It closed across me with room to spare, its sleeves stretched past my reach. The jacket was clean, and I set it down next to its kin. Lifting the bags into the car, I was surprised by their heft, ponderous and mum. Since then, in dream, I wander that resale shop, as if I might see the sleeve, its color exact in memory, the elbow cocked to rest his hands in the pockets during evening walks, as if I could buy back that jacket and all that went with it. Long Arizona sunsets, deepening, the quail cooing, calling out, enormous stars, the hush of footfalls as he walked alone, but for yelps of coyotes in the distance, their cries a ritual of family preparing for the night. The last poem I'll read is the title poem of the collection. Torrential. Why not admit you expect the power of a flash flood that pours toward you out of the literal blue, a desert day as you hike along creek beds? The water's arrival like an annunciation, not of salvation, but imminent inundation. Think of wet fists pummeling your ankles and calves as you look down, surprised by how fast it's coming. At your knees already, this water, heated by the sand's frying pan, as rivulets find each other, swim together toward your feet. You can't outrun the water that froths up at the base of saguaros, spatters gray droplets across leather, cactus skin, and hooked thorns as you catch a last glimpse of sky. You close your eyes at the sting of minerals, the dirt shoved up your nose. You think that at last your unmoored feet will carry you somewhere that answers this moment. The hammer of water, a reminder of when you did not see your mother's sauce pot in hand swinging toward your head that day in your youth for something that you wouldn't take back and won't even now, despite the evidence of a distant thunderstorm up in the hills that you'd ignored, the jagged lightning that spelled your name. Thank you.
Thank you, Kate. I'm so glad you could make it to read from her collection. Next up, we have Katie, author of Flu Season, and she's the author of Quiet Women, which came out in 2018, and is also a professor of English at Grand Rapids Community College, where she teaches composition and creative writing. She is the recipient of a 2023 Elizabeth George Foundation grant, and her poems have been nominated for the Pushcart Prize and Best of the Net. She lives in Michigan with her husband and their 3 children. So I'll let you speak then, Katie.
Thank you, Paige. And thank you everyone for being here. I am reading from Flu Season, which is not a very fun title. People did try to talk me out of it, but these poems, several of them did come about during COVID, but more generally, they came from the sense of dread that I sort of consider a daily companion of mine. However, not all the poems are downers. There's a lot about dread, not just about illness, but about other things, other warnings and things to fear in this life. But there are also several poems about longing and hope. So I have tried to select some poems about spring to share with you today, and there are 5 that I'm going to share. The first one is a COVID poem, and it's called Bunker. Today, the children dug a 10-foot deep hole, a space big enough that they can all fit inside. They shovel the dirt into their wagon, haul it away to make a bike jump, using everything they dismantle. Are they already better at saving their lives than I am? I have molded my life to keep them alive, waking in the night to nurse them through stomach flu and pneumonia, ear aches, itching allergic reactions, fevered dreams. Why didn't I think to hide them underground, where bulbs survive the winter, where snakes and moles and worms shelter in place? Why didn't I think to build them a bunker beneath this troubled world we nurture? The next poem is an experience that I think many of us had during COVID, and it's called Home Haircuts. Finally, we take the clippers from Grandma down out of the cupboard, put the teal cape over the shoulders, set up outside on the deck, and suddenly these boys I know so well seem like strangers below me. I am unprepared for the intimacy of their neck hairs standing on end, the back of the ear, skin reacting pink and hot. At the hum of the machine, my hand trembles. I see the start of tan lines around their t-shirts, a frontier of white skin where the sun hasn't reached. I remember the last time I did this, trying to save money before the children arrived. Then we were on the deck too, but it was fall, and the October winds swept the hair away before it hit the boards. The next spring, we found it in the charcoal grill, woven into a nest that the mice had made. When I take off the cape and look at these small men through their masks of freckles, I'm not sure who they have become. This next poem is a list poem, and everything relates to the title, which is What Rises. The sun, ever earlier and earlier, a bluebird's orange belly to the feeder, a robin beak with a worm, spikes of iris, a heron from the mist off the river, flags on mailboxes up and down the street, steam from our pot of oatmeal, the May woodpile with ash and cottonwood, welt of poison ivy on my ankle, muscari in the lawn, and dandelions, rhubarb stalks, purple heads of asparagus. A second chicken coop the neighbors erect and paint blue. Theodore, the chipmunk, to the deck railing for orange peels and apple cores. The dog's rear end in a yoga pose. My rear end in a yoga pose. My son into a Norway spruce. The river to meet the bank. Masks to overtake faces. The death toll. And at last, the white moon surrendering. The next poem I'm going to share with you is based on a painting by one of my favorite artists who is also a Midwesterner. Her name is Andrea Couch, Kowch. And the painting is called Sojourn. It's pretty easily found with a Google search. So if you can maybe pull it up quickly, I think you might enjoy the poem more if you see the painting. It's again, the title of the painting is Sojourn, and the artist is Andrea Couch, Kowch. The poem is titled A Temporary Stay. It's not the wild hare or the white farm turkey or the butterfly nets filled with wind or even the ruffles on the pretty dresses. It's not the black swallowtail butterflies landing on the big heads of Queen Anne's lace, not the lace collars that the sisters wear. It's the open window on the second story of the house behind them where I pause. The curtain billows out of it, like the nets blowing the same direction. The yellow fields match the yellow hair, aglow, already lifting off into the sky. It's a scene between seasons, on the cusp of change, waiting. The last of something. Like us, it's impermanent. The girls will go back inside later. The wind will die down. The day will draw to its end. The window will close. The butterflies will alight to a different field. We will all leave soon enough. Let us sojourn here a little while longer. And the poem I will end with tonight is one about my dad. The book is dedicated to my dad and my mom, and my dad was killed by a drunk driver in a car accident in February. Before I could tell him about the dedication, I was going to surprise him. So there are some poems in the collection that are about my dad, And this is one that he actually did get to see. It was published in a journal before it was in the poem. And so I'm grateful for that. And this is a happy memory. This is called Radish. The pleasure of finding one red radish in the dense green foliage my father called a garden was a ticket into his just praise, my small system of effort, reward, accomplishment I could finally arrange. We'd sit at the table in the kitchen, look for birds he told us were rare, and wait for him to bite into our plucked radish, halfway through his sandwich that Mom had made again. We waited for the way his eyes would close just after the crunch into it. Then the glimpse of white meat inside the thin red skin, so exotic to the three of us who still held close our naive palates for foods, thoughts, acts. Imagine the taste we conjured from his face, wrinkled in tan content, to be home for lunch, eating food he had grown, harvested by his children, and given to him like jewels we had formed in our sandbox. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Katie. Our next reading is going to be by Brandon Creed, and he's the author of Magnifier, winner of the 2019 Colorado Prize for Poetry. His other poetry collections are in The Gorge, which was published in 2017, Invasives 2014, and a chapbook, Source to Mouth 2012. Two of his collections were finalists for the ASLE Book Award in Environmental Creative Writing, and his work will be featured in Attached to the Living World, a new eco-poetry anthology, forthcoming from Trinity University Press. He grew up in Tualatin, Oregon, and now lives with his family in Kutztown, Pennsylvania, where he teaches at Kutztown University. So Brandon, I'll let you read them.
All right, thank you so much, Paige. And thank you to all the poets reading with me today. Your work has just been wonderful. And I also want to thank Ross Tangadil and Brett Hill and Paige and all the student editors who worked on our books. I'll echo Wayne's sentiments with just the incredible professionalism and what a joy it was to work with you. So thank you. My collection is a new and selected, so it features a selection from my earlier books as well as a new collection of work. So I'm going to read one poem from each of the different collections here. Like Jane, I am from the Pacific Northwest, and I saw that she lived in Port Townsend, and I have a couple of poems that are about Port Townsend. I went to University of Washington for my MFA, and one of my mentors there was Richard Kenny, who lives in Port Townsend, and I house sat for him for about a month one year while he was teaching in Rome. So that's where the first poem that I'm going to read is set, in Port Townsend. It's called Invasives, and it's from my first collection, Invasives. So, Invasives. High tide pressed me up into the yellow, invasive Scotch broom whose roots hold fast as crumbling cliff. Against root give, I clung ever more urgently to the still small voice whose seeds blew into me from 19th century fields, watching tankers drag coal hillsides, tourist districts, shining decks of cars past distant peaks. And since this tide would not retreat, I cut a hard path up the cliff, made my way through vacationers sauntering the green of a fin de siècle fort, where genteel, sympathetic murder was taught. In haphazard rows, children at art camp lounged with ice creams, laughing avidly. There must be a real higher or harder than this, I said, and took the trail up to a bluff overlooking international waters, walked the rim of the impregnable concrete walls of the abandoned gun emplacements. This is a place finally nothing can invade, I thought, admiring the Mayan monumentality stripped of deity. I can build hard apprehension here. Up a narrow ladder, I climbed into the watchtower, shut the iron visor, and sat in ammonia-smelling dark, where deep and calm and perpetual could never take. Then Japanese fire balloons floated elegantly past the long-range guns in this after image of a state park plaque, touching down 70 years ago in Montana forests, igniting a recent candidate's promise of colonies on the moon. Since Katie is from Grand Rapids, I did my PhD at Western Michigan, so I lived in Kalamazoo. So I have a poem that is set in that part of Michigan. This is a poem that I wrote on a drive down from Hope College, where I was teaching at the time, to get back to Kalamazoo, where I was living. And so that's the setting for this poem. It's a driving poem, and it's called "On the Radio, I Heard This Storm." On the radio, I heard this storm that blurred between sweeps of wiper blades the rolling rural world, and backlit suddenly this doorless one-room schoolhouse blocked in with bales of hay was traveling my direction at my speed. I turned the knob to raise the human voices above the drilling droplets as one man who died at 89 today and was being honored confessed to an interviewer years ago the difficulty of giving up French horn to compose orchestral works. I thought I must be passing countless forks and intersections obscured by this semi I closely followed, each leading to some hard-won, hallowed to someone ground. Then my attention came to rest again on the reaching me clearly breaking voice of a woman testifying she thought fireworks were going off in a theater, reached to find her daughter's arm limp, was pinned to her by a bullet in her own spine. The wipers shrieked suddenly in no rain, and I saw that storm she and I were caught in, traveling every direction at every speed. This next poem is the title poem of my third collection. It's called Magnifier. And the magnifier that the title is referring to is a biological magnifier, which I'm probably getting this wrong because I'm a poet, but I feel like poets can kind of cherry pick from science what they want to use. But my understanding is that biological magnifiers are species that can take in some kind of poison in the environment, some kind of toxin like a pesticide, like an earthworm, ingesting an amount of pesticide that won't kill it. But then when a robin eats a number of earthworms, the concentration of the toxin in the robin will kill the robin. So the earthworm is a biological magnifier of the poison. And that's what this title is playing with here. So magnifier. Fallen Osage orange smells like boards at a construction site I used to climb through, stealing nails I didn't need. The adults laughed at the scream of lobsters in the pot. Bump stocks and Bibles, said the wind in the trees. Your rewards will be many. Hedge funds and hegemony. I added that last part after fancy college. Grades tattooed on my ankle. Even the air is ranked like a snack or a scripture. Maybe you see me as a black pearl suddenly valuable. I'm the roach in the knife drawer, wearing a mask of white mold, engorged with atrazine sipped from a dew bead, my gaze snowed out like a robbed, carved god on display for donors. Soon I'll donate my body to popular culture, to eat me and absorb these parts per million. What's left of afternoons by the spillway under the interstate, taking hit after hit of oceanic feeling. And in this last poem, I will return again to Port Townsend. The end of the poem is a memory of a friend of mine and I throwing rocks from the cliffs into the ocean at Port Townsend. But the start of it, the imagery at the beginning is imagery of Portland, actually, where I grew up. Letter to Lost City. Rain sound on that roof patterned me like a loved voice. Now every rain takes me back to the creek swifting down from the mansion of the newspaper magnate over golden alder leaves, proving we can still have something there is no science of. A used volume flipped through at the block-large bookstore, and more even than the translated lover's grief at parting, this recipe for wobbly friendship bread, scribbled in the flyleaf. I copy it for you, friend, remembering that day lobbing rocks from the cliff into the sea, musing we could be in a lost absurdist play by Aeschylus or Euripides. Were there such plays? Were there such blackberries lining our paths through shore pines and the scent of burning sand from the driftwood and the cook stove? I keep re-steeping the oolong we boiled on the stove's iron plate, so long after it tastes only like the water of this other city far away. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Brandon. Then for the last of our readers, we're going to have Teresa Scullin, and she's the author of a poetry collection, Trees and Other Creatures, which was published in 2021, and To Embroider the Ground with Prayer, which came out in 2012. She is a native Michigan thumb. And Teresa teaches the North Ed Writers Studio, which was formerly Front Street Writers Program, for high school students at the Northwest Education Services Career Tech in Traverse City, Michigan. So I'll let you take it away, Teresa.
Thank you, Paige. Can you hear me okay? Okay. So thank you, Cornerstone Press. Thank you, Ross Tangadal, for taking a chance. And I agree with Brandon and Wayne. The professionalism, the care with which I felt this book was treated was wonderful from start to finish. Thanks very much. And thanks, Paige and Ihor, for organizing this reading. And thank you to all of my fellow readers. I really have enjoyed listening to your work. I'll start with the image on the cover is a baby snapping turtle. So I live in Traverse City, Michigan. It's near the northern edge of the Lower Peninsula of Michigan. And we are neighbors with the Sleeping Bear Dunes National Lakeshore, which is where this photo came from. So I'm going to read a poem called The Snapper. In the long green days of summer, my grandfather caught a snapping turtle whose feet were as big as his hands. He stowed it in a heavy crock by the door, lidded with a thick plate and heavy stone, and went to bed dreaming of soup. In the morning, the crock was empty under its plate and stone. The turtle was gone. For all we know, it's living still, all weight and plate and cutting beak, trudging again the slick bottoms, or lying under the mud in the pond, snaking its long neck up like a snorkel, caught by its relentless nature, and freed also. Think of it, encased in that ceramic tomb. Just another egg to break out of, maybe. The same scrabble up slippery sides, the same imperative. The weight of the lid on its back, moving backwards along the carapace, tipping as the turtle clambered up and out, clattering back into place over emptiness, while the turtle, who survived the dinosaurs, the meteorite and nuclear winter, my grandfather's dinner plans, that long moment when you're caught and held by the wicked and the bad, hope sealed off, when you are meant to only wait and tremble. The turtle worked its slow magic, move, move against the heavy dark. The next poem was written when we first became aware that Ukraine had been invaded by Russia. It's hard to believe that was 3 years ago now, but here it is. Meanwhile, bombs fall on Ukraine, shattering everything carefully made, frightening the animals, turning parents into cloaks over children. The old flee on the backs of younger men, picking their way across broken bridges. Once they sat in quiet houses. They gazed out polished windows at trees and birds. watched for spring. Outside my window, the white pine grows a foot every year. It was taken from the woods by a friend who saw it hemmed in and struggling. Now it grows fat and round. Once I found a baby robin deep in its branches, stashed there by a watchful parent while she foraged. We shelter each other. Where we are planted is pure chance. For all we know, the trees of Ukraine, who have no shelter, who appear in photos halved, beheaded, scorched, and jagged, are crying out, their voices carried by westerly winds all the way round the world. For all I know, the trees I live under feel tremors through their toes in the earth, shudder for distant sisters. For all I know, their rising sap catches in their riverine throats. I agree with Brandon that poets can have fun with science. And I also managed to eke out a couple poems during COVID times. So this is an ode for the mRNA vaccine, Stolen Code. By now, the instructions have been destroyed, dissolved and dumped with the trash, as in any spy story. The ribonucleic messengers expelled in the nanoballs of lipids they slid around in, and good riddance. They were greasy company, but useful. By now, the cells have all assembled their spikes, like the cruel gutter spikes that discourage pigeons, who by another name are the doves of peace. Easy for me to talk of peace when my role is merely ceremonial, parasitical, swanning around above the neck while the city-state of the body prepares for siege. We are creatures of war meant to survive, committed right down to the cell. I am allowed to think what I like, to siphon energy, to pretend I know what's going on, to write odes. And I'm keeping an eye on the time here, Paige. I think I have time for 2 more poems, and we'll call it good. This is about dung beetles, and I think I don't have to explain anything. I think it'll become clear. Dung beetles navigate by starlight, hugging their wad, their stash, their futures, is not what I say to the men moving the couch while I open and close doors around them as if I was evolved to do it. They, on the other hand, have got a strange modern shuffle. The sofas from Goodwill will give us ease until its season ends and it returns to Goodwill. In this way, the couch is dung, moving in circles. The house is just expensive access to ground, the right to plant flowers, name birds, watch stars through the empty winter branches. I couldn't take care of it alone. Good thing men are so generous with their muscles. Look at these boys carrying my shit. They look so natural. The dung beetles have been on my mind for a while, charting their courses by light of the Milky Way, a fact confirmed by fitting them with little paper hats to block their view of the sky. Without their guide, they move in tiring circles, getting nowhere. I empathize. I know the force of earthly imperative, the couch, the mortgage I wear like a hat, other worries that obscure the light. For beetles, single stars merely confuse. The whole galaxy is needed. How things fit together, that's what matters, like the miracle of roofs that hold weight over our heads while we sleep. Somebody figured that out and shared. Another wonder, how we sometimes help each other find the right road. Once, my love drove us straight through the black night emptiness of Texas. He pulled over, we got out. He backed me up against him and held me close. Look, he said. We looked up. And one more. This is kind of a combination of science and a Crassus poem. I really love the images of cells dividing. They're often onion cells, I believe, on slides, sort of dyed with a purple dye. This is called mitosis. Arrested mid-split, sliced and stained, laid between layers of glass, the purpled spindles reach around the chromosomes and pull. This is how it must be. The matched homologous pairs, which once were one, now bent over double as they are wrenched apart. Strange, the silence of anguish under glass. Like stained windows in a church, bloodied stained saints calling, reaching out their palms. How we keep becoming. Chromatin gathered into thread, mitos from the ancient Greeks, who were always weaving, weren't they? Things that come apart. The separated pairs are dragged to the far ends and held there like fighters, like lovers torn, while the cell walls close, making two from one. It gets confusing. What is one? What is the other? Like, I had a father once. When he left his body, we were still holding him with our fingers, these spindles. Or everything inside, all the unseen silent tearings. Sometimes I feel the pull in my throat. Look, I was cut here on my palm. Now it is healed. Think what it took. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Teresa. With that is the end of our reading portion. So for the rest of our time, we're open to question and answer. So if you're one of the guests, feel free to put questions in the chat, but I can get us started for questions. So my first question for every author, and you guys can go one at a time, however you decide that. It's kind of weird on Zoom. But who are your biggest influences and like inspirations as writers?
Well, I'll go ahead and answer since no one else has. Um, my earliest influences were Dylan Thomas and E.E. Cummings. And I especially love the music of Dylan Thomas's poetry and the way he read his poems. And I played the violin for a long time and used to be a music critic. And I just, music has always been a huge part of my life. And the poetry that I tend to like best is poetry that has a lot of music to it. The the word play is nice, but I want to feel it in my body too, and not just in my mind. And along with music, nature is a huge influence for me, and I really appreciate how many of the poems that the other four read were so richly about nature, inspired by nature. And I meditate a lot, and I love being in nature because that is a meditation, and I learn from, like the poem of mine about putting my hands on the old Douglas fir. I learn from nature, and nature teaches me how to be and how to write and how to sing. Thank you.
I think Paige, it's kind of a hard question to answer because my influences do shift, as I discover new poets um, and as my writing changes. But I would say early influences would be Wendell Berry and James Wright. Galway Canal, it has that kind of chewy music that I really love. Jane Kenyon, Ruth Stone. Those are some of the earlier ones. Now I dip into Larry Levis or Merwin. Yeah, it shifts. It shifts for me. And nature, of course. Yeah, that's a huge inspiration and refuge. And science. I like science. It's kind of a puzzle to work out sometimes.
I guess I can go. Oh, go ahead.
Are you
Sorry.
sure, Brandon? This is no offense to you, Paige. This is a question I dread. It's like I've never read a book in my life when somebody asks me this. Um, so I will just get this over with. I think like what Teresa said, it does change over time. Some of the people that she mentioned, absolutely Wendell Berry, I kind of keep coming back to, and Jane Kenyon. I have found though that this is sort of a weird answer, maybe not even to the question, but speaking of science, one of the things where I get so much inspiration is like the Smithsonian Magazine. I feel like it's about science, but they write like poets. And I find that that has been, I've been a subscriber to that for a long time. And so that's kind of what comes to mind, which is not one particular person, but just I love that magazine. And I think that it unites science and um, writing in a really neat way. Okay, Brandon, let's hear from you.
Well, I cheated because I have my books all right behind me. So I'm just going to run through a few that I grabbed. Gary Snyder, Myths and Texts. Merwin was mentioned. Lalice is my favorite of his. A.R. Ammons is a big one for me. I love Expressions of Sea Level. Robert Haas, Field Guide. Gene Valentine is a favorite. Pilgrims, but I like some of her other books too. And then Lorene Niedecker is another one. This is not my favorite collected of hers, but it was the one I had. But those are the poets that like I go back to again and again and again. And then there's other more recent poets, younger poets like Sherwin Bitsui and Mei Bersenbrug, Arthur Z. Mostly nature poets, really, who I go to for inspiration.
I can just briefly say that, speaking for Jane, I don't really know who her biggest influences were. I imagine a lot of the poets that have been mentioned so far are probably poets that she read because there's a lot of commonality. She was very influenced by nature. She also had a little bit of a scientific bent as well. So I'm sure she was reading a lot of the same people that have been mentioned. And she also was part of a lot of literary communities. I know she thanks a lot of people that she wrote with and took workshops from. And it was interesting to hear Brandon talk about Port Townsend because I know the Port Townsend Writers Conference was something she participated in, and she had a writing group like in that area. I'm not from there myself, so it's all foreign to me. So it's fun to kind of learn about these places and kind of the awesome beauty of that part of the world. So yeah, so that's pretty much as much as I can say about what I know Jane's influences were.
Again, if you're a guest and you want to add anything, questions for the authors, feel free to leave it in the chat. But one of my other questions was, why are you drawn to poetry instead of maybe say short story or novels? Or maybe you guys are working on that right now, but why did you choose poetry kind of as your main form of writing?
I have a good answer for this one. Or at least it's an easier one for me to talk about. I have tried other forms, but it's awful. It's a crash and burn type of situation. I think for me, poetry, it has like the appropriate horizon. I did my MFA while I was having my 3 children. Like I spread it out, it went part-time. And I think that says a lot. Like my attention span like was only it was short. And even now that they're all independent and like some are driving and everything, it's still sort of how I think about putting something on the page. Not that all my poems are short, but I think it's something about that horizon, being able to see sort of the end of a piece. And I have not yet cracked the code on how to do that with longer works.
I'll take a shot at this, although it's tough. I don't know if I chose poetry so much as it chose me. It is something I can't help. Does that make sense? I can't help it. And there is something about the density. It feels like I do write other things. I do write essays. I'm trying to work on a long form nonfiction project. It's kind of blowing my mind right now because it's so unwieldy. But there's something about the density of language when something starts to emerge. If it's a certain weight, then it's bound to be a poem. If it's a different weight, then I probably am going to have to work on it in a different way. So it kind of chooses its own, whatever I'm writing about chooses its own genre in a way.
Yeah, I might just piggyback briefly on what Teresa said, that I think there's a certain kind of compactness to poetry and kind of a crystalline purity almost that you can achieve in a poem, and you can encapsulate experience in it in a way that no other literary form can quite achieve. And so that's kind of what I see when I read Jane's work, is kind of the pure accounting of an experience, with all the sensory elements and the connection to nature, and also the, the emotional or personal history relationship, that everything somehow all becomes crystallized just in those lines, especially when every word is kind of, honed to be in the exact right place. And that's something I've always really admired about the way that Jane wrote.
Yeah, I agree totally with that. And with what you said, Teresa. For me, well, poetry chose me too. I don't have a choice either. It's just it's a blessing and a curse, right? And I've written all different kinds of things and plays and memoirs and things, but I always come back to poetry. And one of the big reasons is, for me, meditation and poetry are very similar. They're both about being present and being totally tuned into what's going on right here, right now. And poetry helps me focus on the moment and be more aware of everything around and within me. And so it's really a practice. It's like a spiritual practice as well as a writing practice. Yeah.
I would just echo what everyone said. Totally agree. I love the condensation of poetic language, the brevity, the sense of presence. And I would just add that I've tried to write fiction, and I'm terrible at trying to figure out characters' motivations. It's really hard to understand how other people, what makes them tick. So I just stick to trying to figure out what makes me tick. That's hard enough.
Every time I've tried writing a novel, Brandon, it's ended up a poem.
I have to say, I'm really loving how, we've gone through some years of trial and turbulence with COVID and political upheaval and war. And I have appreciated how people who don't normally talk about poetry talk about poetry now, because they're turning to it for solace or just helps you take a breath. So I appreciate that it's in the public sphere in that way right now.
Yeah, thank you all for those answers. Kind of with that one, my next one would be, what does your writing process look like? And I know sometimes that's a hard question too, but if you have any specifics you can kind of talk about.
It's funny to me. I mean, it's a good question, Paige, and there's always that question about process, right? It's like I like listening to people's answers because I think, well, maybe I can learn something to light a fire under my own tuchus once in a while. I mean, my own process is variable, and a good day, it looks a certain way, but I'm a teacher, so that has to come first. And I run out of juice, right? So in the summertime, I have more time. I like to read and annotate and then get into writing. Reading really helps me get in that frame of mind. And I need about 3 days away from other worries to kind of get in a poetry frame of mind. So that's my short answer. But I am also kind of wondering at the same time, like, why we like to talk about process. For reassurance, maybe?
I can say something, I guess. So give me 1 second. I'm gonna grab a couple. So I love writing tools, and everything for me has to start off the computer. I hate writing online or on the computer at first because it's too distracting. So I love to write in notebooks. My favorite right now is the Midori MD notebooks. They're just really elegant white notebooks, not terribly expensive. And then I really love pens and pencils. My favorite pencil right now is the Cran Dash Swiss Wood. It smells like chocolate and nutmeg and hickory and cinnamon and all kinds of good things. And then I also love the Kaweco mechanical pencils and fountain pens. These are really nice. And then if I'm not writing by hand, I like typewriters. I think between me and my family, we have 9 typewriters. The one I normally use day to day is a Smith Corona Galaxy 12. But I just love the mechanical. I love the clacking. I love the rhythms of it. The way that it indents the page feels very satisfying. And so, yeah, so I just like to, put a piece of paper in the typewriter and start clacking and see where it goes, or start jotting, scratching across the page and just see what happens. That's what's fun for me.
I'll jump in. Yeah, I always write with longhand first, but I'll write with anything that's at hand, Brendan. I don't have any special pens, but yeah, longhand first, and then I'll transfer it to the computer and then start the rewriting process, which can go on for years. And in terms of the germ of poems or the inspiration of poems, that ideas often come to me when I'm meditating. just a title or a first line. And I used to beat myself up over that, like, I want to be meditating, but now I just can kind of consider it part of the process. And I don't have any problem at all not breaking off my meditation session, but just transferring it to writing. And I also, I use William Stafford's process pretty often. He got up every morning at 5 and wrote, and he had a very specific process. If you're not familiar with it, it's really interesting and it really works. So, and the other thing is the muse is fickle. And I've found that if you say no, she might go away and pout for a while. So I always try to say yes.
Yeah, I might just follow up on what Wayne said. I can't speak for Jane. I can speak for myself. I do compose on the computer usually, but if I'm not at my computer and I suddenly have an idea, like a line pops into my head, I've learned that I will not remember it. I'll totally forget it unless I write it down like immediately. So I'll write on like a magazine or an envelope or like whatever is at hand. And then I'll have all these, random scribbles and I'll have to go and like sort through them and try to make them into a real poem, like, later that night or the next day or something. So, I mean, it's always exciting when that moment kind of takes hold and something occurs to you that you think you can see through and create something out of it. And then I might just follow up too on the previous question about why poetry, because I was thinking even just, what we heard at this reading tonight, poetry can do so many things, I mean, we have, something like what Wayne has done, which is, really kind of a memoir in poems, right? Or the poems that are handling scientific topics or grappling with COVID or with the war in Ukraine. I mean, a poem can be about just about anything. And I think it's rare, that's a rare kind of form that can accommodate so many different voices and purposes. And that's one of the things I really love about poetry. And I love about hearing from other poets and hearing all the different ways that they engage with poetry. So it's been a real treat to hear everyone read tonight.
Okay, well, if no one has anything else, that'll kind of conclude our webinar tonight. Thank you everyone for, being able to make it. It's great to have these events and have a kind of community. So I'm just really glad you guys could make it. They're all great readings and I hope you have a great rest of your night. So, and thanks to everyone who joined.
Thank you, Paige.
Thank you. It was great to meet all of you.
Well, yes, all of you too.
Yeah.
Great to
Bye-bye.
meet you. Thank you, Paige.
Yeah.
Thank you, Igor.
And Ihor, thank you too.
And thanks for being here, everyone.